Random House Audio presents End This Depression Now by Paul Krugman. Read for you by Rob Shapiro. With an introduction read by the author. Publisher's note. The author references charts throughout this program, which can be viewed by opening the accompanying digital PDF file on any PC or Mac computer.
This is Paul Krugman. Introduction. What do we do now? This is a book about the economic slump now afflicting the United States and many other countries. A slump that has now entered its 5th year and which shows no signs of ending anytime soon. Needless to say, many books about the financial crisis of 2008, which marked the beginning of the slump, have already been published, and there are, no doubt, many more in the pipeline. But this book is, I believe, different from most of those other books, because it tries to answer a different question. For the most part, the mushrooming literature on our economic disaster asks, how did this happen? My question instead is, what do we do now? Obviously, these are somewhat related questions, but they are by no means identical. Knowing what causes heart attacks is not at all the same thing as knowing how to treat them. The same is true of economic crises. And right now, the question of treatment should be what concerns us most. Every time I read some academic or opinion article discussing what we should be doing to prevent future financial crises, and I read many such articles, I get a bit impatient. Yes, it's a worthy question, but since we have yet to recover from the last crisis, shouldn't achieving recovery be our first priority? For we are still, very much, living in the shadow of the economic catastrophe that struck both Europe and the United States 4 years ago. Gross domestic product, which normally grows a couple of % a year, is barely above its pre-crisis peak, even in countries that have seen a relatively strong recovery, and is down by double digits in several European nations. Meanwhile, unemployment on both sides of the Atlantic remains at levels that would have seemed inconceivable before the crisis. The best way to think about this continued slump, I'd argue, is to accept the fact that we're in a depression. No, it's not the Great Depression, at least not for most of us. But talk to the Greeks, the Irish, or even the Spaniards who have 23% unemployment and almost 50% unemployment among the young. But it's nonetheless essentially the same kind of situation John Maynard Keynes described in the 1930s. A chronic condition of subnormal activity for a considerable period without any marked tendency either towards recovery or towards complete collapse. And that's not a satisfactory condition. There are some economists and policy officials who seem satisfied with avoiding complete collapse, but the reality is that this chronic condition of subnormal activity, reflected above all in a lack of jobs, is inflicting enormous cumulative human damage. So it's extremely important that we take action to promote a real, full recovery. And here's the thing, we know how to do that. Or at least we should know how to do that. We are suffering woes that, for all the differences in detail that come with 75 years of economic, technological, and social change, are recognizably similar to those of the 1930s. And we know what policymakers should have been doing then, both from the contemporary analysis of Keynes and others, and from much subsequent research and analysis. That same analysis tells us what we should be doing in our current predicament. Unfortunately, we're not using the knowledge we have, because too many people who matter, politicians, public officials, and the broader class of writers and talkers who define conventional wisdom, have, for a variety of reasons, chosen to forget the lessons of history and the conclusions of several generations' worth of economic analysis, replacing that hard-won knowledge with ideologically and politically convenient prejudices. Above all, conventional wisdom, among what some of us have taken to referring to sarcastically as very serious people, has completely thrown away Keynes's central dictum. The boom, not the slump, is the time for austerity. Now is the time for the government to spend more, not less, until the private sector is ready to carry the economy forward again, yet job-destroying austerity policies have instead become the rule. This book, then, is an attempt to break the hold of that destructive conventional wisdom, and to make the case for the expansionary, job-creating policies we should have been following all along. To make that case, I need to present evidence. Yes, this book has charts in it. But I hope that this doesn't make it seem technical or keep it from being accessible to intelligent lay readers, even if economics is not their usual thing. For what I'm trying to do here, in effect, is to go over the heads of the serious people, who have, for whatever reason, taken all of us down the wrong path at immense cost to our economies and our societies, and appeal to informed public opinion in an effort to get us doing the right thing instead. Maybe, just maybe, our economies will be on a rapid path to true recovery by the time this book reaches the shelves, and this appeal won't be necessary. I surely hope so, but I very much doubt it. Instead, all indications are that the economy will remain weak for a very long time unless our policymakers change course. And my aim here is to bring pressure via an informed public to get that course change and bring an end to this depression.
Chapter 1. How Bad Things Are. I think as those green shoots begin to appear in different markets, and as some confidence begins to come back, that will begin the positive dynamic that brings our economy back. Do you see green shoots? I do. I do see green shoots. Ben Bernanke, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, interviewed by 60 Minutes, March 15, 2009. In March 2009, Ben Bernanke, normally neither the most cheerful nor the most poetic of men, waxed optimistic about the economic prospect. After the fall of Lehman Brothers 6 months earlier, America had entered a terrifying economic nosedive. But appearing on the TV show 60 Minutes, the Fed chairman declared that spring was at hand. His remarks immediately became famous, not least because they bore an eerie resemblance to the words of Chance, a.k.a. Chauncey Gardner, the simple-minded gardener mistaken for a wise man in the movie Being There. In one scene, Chance, asked to comment on economic policy, assures the president, "As long as the roots are not severed, all is well, and all will be well in the garden. There will be growth in the spring." Despite the jokes, however, Bernanke's optimism was widely shared, and at the end of 2009, Time declared Bernanke its Person of the Year. Unfortunately, all was not well in the garden, and the promised growth never came. To be fair, Bernanke was right that the crisis was easing. The panic that had gripped financial markets was ebbing, and the economy's plunge was slowing. According to the official scorekeepers at the National Bureau of Economic Research, the so-called Great Recession that started in December 2007 ended in June 2009, and recovery began. But if it was a recovery, it was one that did little to help most Americans. Jobs remained scarce. More and more families depleted their savings, lost their homes, and worst of all, lost hope. True, the unemployment rate is down from the peak it reached in October 2009, but progress has come at a snail's pace. We're still waiting, after all these years, for that positive dynamic Bernanke talked about to make an appearance. And that was in America, which at least had a technical recovery. Other countries didn't even manage that. In Ireland, in Greece, in Spain, in Italy, debt problems and the austerity programs that were supposed to restore confidence not only aborted any kind of recovery, but produced renewed slumps and soaring unemployment. And the pain went on and on. I'm writing these words almost 3 years after Bernanke thought he saw those green shoots, 3.5 years after Lehman fell, more than 4 years after the start of the Great Recession. The citizens of the world's most advanced nations, nations rich in resources, talent, and knowledge, all the ingredients for prosperity and a decent standard of living for all, remain in a state of intense pain. In the rest of this chapter, I'll try to document some of the main dimensions of that pain. I'll focus mainly on the United States, which is both my home and the country I know best, reserving an extended
Sample complete. Ready to continue?